Hello and welcome to Timeless Tabletop Gaming. This month I've been very kindly invited to take part in a collaboration with some other Middle-earth Warmaster YouTubers. The premise is simple. We've each been tasked with making a 10mm scale Middle-earth diorama and then releasing a video about it. Then whoever has the best one gets to delete the loser's YouTube channels from the internet. Actually, that last bit isn't true. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing actually at stake. Just an excuse for some jolly cooperation. When I started my Battle of 5 Armies project, I must admit I had no idea there were so many other people just as passionate about bringing Tolkien's epic battles to life in 10mm scale, and it's been a joy to discover all of the amazing work that's been going on around me. Until recently, I hadn't heard of Warmaster Revolution, let alone the amazing War of the Rings supplement. As such, I've been ploughing my own little furrow with my Battle of 5 Armies series, so this collaboration is a really great opportunity for me to connect with some like-minded folks and share some of my own hobby talents. The only problem being that my hobby talents are about as limited as the vegan options in Barad-dûr. Despite having been in the hobby since the era of ponytails, waistcoats and goblin green bases, I've never really bothered to learn how to do anything beyond buying miniatures and then giving them a passable paint job. I'm not sure if it's due to a lack of imagination or a lack of ambition, but it's honestly never crossed my mind to make a diorama before. I think I've always seen miniatures as perfect little dioramas in their own right, each one telling its own little story just as it is. And when you line them up with their mates on a tabletop with a bit of scenery, well, they practically spring to life at that point. Maybe that's it. Perhaps it's not so much a lack of imagination on my part, but an overabundance of it. Or maybe I'm just getting my excuses in early. When the idea of a 10mm Middle-earth diorama was pitched to me, my mind immediately jumped to three particular iconic moments in Tolkien's work, strangely all with a similar theme. The first was a scene from the Silmarillion and the Children of Hurin, both of which I had recently finished reading. Specifically the moment Turin Turambar comes face to face with Glaurung, the father of dragons, and stands powerless against him, transfixed and forced to watch his love Finduilas being taken captive by orcs. The second was from The Hobbit, the slaying of Smaug, where Bard the Bowman takes aim with his black arrow and halts the dragon's fiery wrath against the people of Laketown, and in doing so sets in motion the events that lead to the Battle of 5 Armies. The third was also from The Hobbit, Bilbo's meeting with Smaug in the mountain fortress of Erebor. As the great worm basks on his ill-gotten mound of gold, the Hobbit must use his wit and tongue to survive, with a little help from his magic ring of course. So it's clear my subconscious had decided that this image of a single figure coming face to face with a mighty dragon would make for an interesting diorama. And why not? It's a classic motif in myths and legends through the ages. So then it was just a case of picking which one to go with. As much as I loved the idea of doing Turin's tortured encounter with Glaurung, I decided that it just made too much sense for me as a Battle of 5 Armies enthusiast to represent the Hobbit in this challenge. And of all of Tolkien's work, it's the dearest to my heart. So that left Bard's encounter with Smaug or Bilbo's. Both are centred around Smaug but in very different guises, one mid-flight and full of rage, the other lounging comfortably and totally self-assured. For the former, I instantly knew of the perfect model, the official Games Workshop Battle of 5 Armies Smaug. Wings spread, jaws wide and belly exposed. Amongst some ruined, burning Laketown buildings, with Bard poised to take his shot from a rooftop, it would look superb. The only problem being that, as I well knew, the official Smaug miniature is as rare and expensive as hell. Dropping £100 plus on a mini is not something I'm in the habit of doing, and if I did, I'd want to be able to use it on the tabletop, not have it built into a diorama. As part of my Battle of 5 Armies project, I'd searched for similar dragons from other manufacturers, but sadly I'd found nothing that was comparable. However, in that search I had found a Smaug-like dragon that could just be a perfect fit for a conversation with a hobbit. This is the Green Dragon from Dark Sword Miniatures. It's a beauty, isn't it? It just screams Smaug to me. The litheness, the overconfidence, the slight smirk. It's part of a series of dragons, all equally amazing in their own way. And although they are described as 28mm, in my opinion they are much better suited for 10mm. I have to credit the amazing Under the Mountain blog for pointing me in the direction of these dragons, and in fact this blog has been invaluable to me in my Battle of 5 Armies project. It hasn't been updated since 2014, but a big thank you to whoever made this amazing resource. I'll put the link in the description. So, with Smaug sorted, it was time to think about Bilbo. There is a Bilbo included with the Battle of 5 Armies game. I'd painted him up in a previous video, and I do have a spare. Unfortunately, he's sculpted with Gandalf directly beside him, and so would need to be cut away, which would be possible but definitely not ideal. Luckily, I'd recently picked up the Heroes and Halflings set from Copplestone Castings, which is a 10mm homage to the Fellowship of the Ring. I'd already painted up the Legolas included to join my Mirkwood Elves, and was really impressed with the sculpt. And of course there are 4 hobbits in the set to represent Merry, Pippin, Frodo and Sam, one of which could make for a perfect Bilbo. I'm not sure which one I like best yet. I quite like the one holding a walking stick, as it does seem quite suited to Bilbo. The one pointing looks a bit too confident for a meeting with Smaug. The one drawing a sword looks like it's supposed to be Sam to me for some reason. It's a surprisingly good likeness for Sean Astin. The one with the sword drawn looks good though. I like the way he's holding it in fear. So there are 2 I quite like the look of, but I don't need to settle on one just yet. I need to think more about how the diorama is going to look. Maybe now's a good time to look for some inspiration. Let's have a look at my Tolkien shelf for some of the resource and art books I've picked up over the years. These are a constant source of information and inspiration to me, and I'm always digging around in charity shops for more. This Tolkien's World art book is a particular favourite. Let's see what's inside. Here we go. The Glow of Smaug by Carol Emery Phoenix. This is a great piece and sets the scene nicely. It does remind me of another artwork though. I think it's in the copy of The Hobbit I owned as a kid. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is really similar. I guess Carol Phoenix was recreating this piece in her own style. This is an absolutely perfect reference for me, and I think it was painted by Tolkien himself. I love Smaug's expression of vague amusement here. He's like a curious cat watching a mouse. Little does he know that this little creature is about to bring about his doom. One thing I can't help but notice is the fact that Bilbo is, of course, wearing his ring. This is something that's going to be hard to recreate in my diorama. Making an invisible miniature in 28mm is possible, as seen in the Middle-earth strategy battle game. Theoretically, I guess it would be possible to create a little green stuff mould and cast a see-through resin Bilbo, but I'm not sure I'm capable or willing, to be honest. I'm not sure it would read well at this scale anyway. It'd probably just look like a lump of dried PVA glue. Another option would be to try and paint him as invisible, but again that sounds well beyond my skill set. I think I'll just paint Bilbo as normal, perhaps hiding him behind something as if he's yet to put on the ring. This is how it plays out in Peter Jackson's depiction of the scene in The Desolation of Smaug. In Tolkien's artwork, Bilbo is shrouded in smoke, so maybe I could experiment using some cotton wool or something. I'd also be using some other artworks for inspiration, there's plenty of them, but I'd be picking and choosing aspects rather than trying to perfectly recreate any one in particular. So, feeling suitably inspired, and with Smaug having now arrived, it was now time to get started. Let's take a closer look at this green dragon from Darksword Miniatures. It looks just as good in the flesh as it did in the photos, and it was something like £12 to buy. I'm so impressed with this thing. Scale wise it looks spot on with my Copplestone Hobbits, and there was only a tiny bit of flash and mould lines to remove, and the wings were nice and easy to glue in place. The pose is just perfect for Smaug on his treasure pile, but I need to start thinking about how to disguise the rock our dragon is currently sitting on. I thought about using modelling putty or clay, but I didn't have any of that to hand. What I did have was some cork sheets, so I broke up some into little pieces and started experimenting with building up a mound around the dragon. It seemed to work okay, so in the spirit of just get the fuck on with it, I started gluing pieces on. That's something that doesn't come naturally to me, as I'm constantly terrified of messing things up, but it's something I've noticed a lot of people who are good at this sort of thing have, a willingness to just experiment without fear. I knew I'd need to challenge a bit of that to get anywhere with this diorama challenge. One benefit of building the base out with cork is that it allows me to do it quite organically, just slowly adding to the pile bit by bit until it looks right. There are some awkward areas around the dragon's legs, especially his right hind leg which dangles down from the rock. This would need a bit of extra thought for it to not look weird and unnatural. Once I was happy with this first phase of the treasure mound, I covered it with modelling paste to smooth it out and seal it in place. Now it was time to think about the base for the diorama. I decided to go to the dystopian nightmare hellscape that is the Range, a place where your eyes are blinded by fluorescent lights on impossibly high ceilings, and your ears are assaulted by a drone of overlapping adverts for miracle mops and Tupperware pots. They do have a large arts and crafts section though, which is nice. I came back with a few bits which I thought would come in handy for the project, which will be popping up later. But for the base, I found this wooden painting board for just $2.99! At 8 by 10 inches, it seemed like a good size, especially as I wanted to cut off a section to become a backboard. I put the dragon down to give me an idea of scale, and decided about 3 inches of backboard would look about right. So I got it marked up and then sawed off. Yeah, no messing around here. I realised that because of the frame on the bottom of the board, I could make a background with a bit of depth, so I decided to have it facing that way round. I had something in mind from a piece of art we looked at earlier, but I'll come back to that later. I sprayed the base black and undercoated the dragon, ready for painting. I haven't painted many dragons in my time, but I just picked out some Smaug-like colours and got to work. I started with Jaquero Orange, which I thought would make for a good base for Smaug's underbelly and wings. I really love this colour, I need to use it more. I painted the rest of him with Corn Red, which is a nice dark shade with good opacity. I then painted his horns and claws with Ushabti Bone. I gave the areas around the base, around the dragon, a coat of Balor Brown, just in case any crevices became hard to reach later. I used Ungor Flesh to dry brush the Jaquero Orange areas to pick out some of the raised detail. And I did the same again with Ushabti Bone. I then tidied up with some more Corn Red where the dry brushing had gone awry. And then started the fiddly process of trying to paint the spines in the wings. This took some going back and forth with Corn Red and Jaquero Orange, as you'd imagine. With that done, I then absolutely drowned the model in Reichland Flesh Shade. Yeah, I have a bad habit of going too heavy with washes, and I even missed a bit where it had pulled quite badly on the wing, which then needed to be fixed. When will I learn, eh? I went back in with the dry brush with some more Ungor Flesh and Ushabti Bone. And I decided to dry brush Smaug's scales and ridges too. First with Ushabti Bone, then with Wazdaka Red. I did the Ushabti Bone step because I thought it might make the Wazdaka Red pop more. I have no idea if that's an actual thing though, I'm just making it up as I go along. I then went back over the horns and claws with Ushabti Bone. At some point the eyes were painted with Ushabti Bone and a dot of black, but I did this off camera apparently, which is probably for the best. I used some Skeleton Horde contrast to paint the bases of the horns and claws, and I added a glaze of Imperial Fist contrast paint over the eyes to give them a sinister yellow glow. And with that, I decided that Smaug was pretty much done. It's a relatively basic paint job, but I'm not sure what more I can do with my level of painting, to be honest. I did go back and do some more touch-ups here and there, but for now it was time to move on. I started to think about the base of the diorama, and in particular the floor. I bought a 3D printed flagstone tile roller from eBay, which was available in 10mm scale, and some air drying clay. When the roller turned up, it was absolutely tiny. I can only imagine they shrank down a 28mm scale roller in its entirety, rather than just scaling down the actual pattern.
What is this? A roller for ants?
Well, undeterred, I rolled out some clay and started trying to make some strips of flagstone floor. It was really messy work, and the tiny roller was a fiddly little bastard to use. It was basically impossible to be precise and consistent, which is a problem when I needed to be lining up several of these things to cover the floor. Over the coming days I kept making more and more of these flagstone strips, each time completely failing to get anything usable. It started to become a bit of a nightmare. At this point I should probably have just given up and come up with an entirely different approach, but unfortunately I was too fixated to use that sort of common sense. Instead, I used some baking paper and some bits of MDF to create a kind of mould for the clay to sit in to keep it a consistent depth, and hopefully keep the roller nice and straight. Cue several more days of abject failure. It's worth mentioning that the curing time is like 24 hours for these things, so there was a hell of a lot of waiting time too. It got so bad, I felt the need to record a video diary type thing.
I'm about 2 or maybe even 3 weeks into my Diorama build, and so far I have a painted dragon and a lot of hopes and dreams. I've been doing a lot of experimenting and failing because most of the things I'm trying aren't really working. Yeah, it's just been a complete nightmare. I think at this point, after many attempts, I'm going to have to find a different method.
Jesus, I sound like a broken man. Well, thankfully I was soon back to my usual enormously charismatic self after a sudden breakthrough.
So, yeah, I'm feeling like a bit of an idiot because I spent so long on that stupid roller, just ground the whole project to a halt because effectively I can't really do anything until I've got that ground layer where I can build up from it in the space of 30 or 40 minutes. I've just knocked up exactly what I wanted with some foam board, a ruler and a pencil. Obviously not that hard to draw a grid. I don't know why I thought you would need a roller to do that, but yeah, unsurprisingly it's quite easy. We can finally crack on and get some progress done.
What a moron, eh? And I forgot to film it. Well, luckily I still had to recreate the process as I wanted a similar effect for the backboard. Taking inspiration from Tolkien's own conversation with Smaug art, I wanted to recreate the 3 arches leading to the stairs shown in the background. I cut out a piece of foam board to size and then marked out and cut out the 3 arches. I used a 25mm round base to get the semicircle shape if you're wondering. I then used a ruler and a pencil to mark out some lines for the stonework. Once I was happy with that, I went over the lines again, but pressing firmly with the pencil to score and indent the lines. Here's how it looked once it was done. After that, it was textured and distressed with a ball of scrunched up kitchen foil, just as the floor had been. Once that was done, it was all sealed with some watered down Mod Podge and then painted up. Again, sorry for not documenting much of this, but I'll quickly summarise. I painted the whole thing grey, coloured some tiles for variation, dry brushed with some light brown and then slapped on some Army Painter Quick Shade and finished with a spray of matte varnish. I then started work on the stairs which are visible through the arches. Using Tolkien's picture again as a reference, I tried to sketch out the ascending stairs by using increasingly narrower and shorter lines. Being reasonably happy with that, I painted it up and even attempted some atmospheric fog. It's more Neil Buchanan than Bob Ross, but I think it will do the job. Somehow I'd slightly misjudged the height of the back piece and it left some of the frame exposed at the top. I decided to use some more foam board to make a kind of decorative border by carving in some geometric lines. With Smaug painted and the base and background now done, I decided I needed a bit of decoration and visual interest for the scene. In much of the artwork there are big pots of gold which litter the scene, as well as weapons and various other treasures scattered around. There aren't many manufacturers making things like this in 10mm, but thankfully Pendraken has a range of dungeon accessories at this scale. I picked up some weapon racks, pillars, bone piles and treasure piles. From Perfect 6 I also picked up some nice looking pots, and everything was then painted up and given a coat of quickshade. I went back and started expanding Smaug's base a bit more with cork and modelling paste, and then it was time for another video diary bit.
The finish line is in sight, but I've been slacking off a little bit recently, mainly because the next step requires a bit of commitment. Because effectively what I have at the minute is like a little playset, like I can move things around and try out different layouts. But the next step is going to be to firmly decide where things are going to go and then stick them down and actually kind of start doing the last kind of steps. So I'm going to have a little play around now and just try out some different layouts and see if I can find one I particularly like. So let's crack on.
My playing around with layouts here didn't really end up with anything concrete. I came away with a vague sense of what I wanted, but there was nothing that jumped out as being the one. This was actually quite reassuring, as it meant there really wasn't a wrong way. I could just go with my gut. One thing that did stand out was that the pillars looked a bit bare, so I decided to create some little braziers to sit on top. These fiddly little bastards were made with some staples, screw caps and a lot of swearing. I later added some cork pieces as bits of coal and added a band around them with some electrical tape. Painted up, I think they're reasonably convincing and they'll certainly make the pillars look a lot more interesting. One thing I had been pretty set on was the position of Smaug, so I decided to get him glued down and then blended his base into the flagstones with some filler and paint. Yeah, things are getting pretty serious now. Okay, it was time to think about the massive treasure pile that Smaug needs to be sitting on. I'd seen some tutorials for treasure piles which involved mixing glitter and Mod Podge, so I'd already taken the liberty of buying a big tub of glitter from the range. My experiments with it had been somewhat successful, but the glitter I'd bought looked a bit cheapo, and bits would clump together like sand when mixed with the Mod Podge. I decided to try and just add some to the base as if it were flock, just to see how it looked. I don't know why, but the lighting in this bit of video makes it look like I'm doing something really suspicious. I look like I've snuck downstairs in the dead of night in order to raid my 8-year-old daughter's glitter supplies. But I haven't. This is my own pretty glitter that I bought with my own pocket money. So with that dried and some more bits glued down, things were starting to look more promising. The cheapo glitter wasn't really cutting it, however, so I took a trip to Hobbycraft to see if I could find something better, and thankfully I was able to find something much more appropriate, but naturally more expensive. Not only is the gold colour a lot nicer, but it actually looks like little coins rather than flakes. I've also got some other colours to act as gems and whatnot. My daughter is going to be so jealous when she sees all of this. No, sweetheart, you can't use this on your school project. This is serious, super grown up daddy glitter. Actually, speaking of my daughter, I have to give her a special mention for these amazing pictures she made for me to put up in my hobby area. She's always really fascinated by my weird little hobby and loves to come over and talk to me about goblins and dragons when I'm working on stuff. And yes, don't worry, she'll get the glitter when I'm finished with it. I'll put it in my will. I got a pot and started pouring the glitter in to create a mix of the various shades and colours and gave it a good stir. I then coated Smaug's mound in watered down Mod Podge and again applied it like it was flock. Once it was dry, here's how it looked. Yeah, that's not too bad, but the ratio of gems and coins doesn't look quite right. I decided to do a second coat with more watered down Mod Podge and this time added a lot more gold coins. I also tried to splay the area out a bit more to make it look a bit more natural and haphazard. And I added coins in and around the pots. Here's how that looked once it was dry. Yeah, that's looking pretty decent, I think. It was still looking a little bit too much like glitter, so as a final step I added a wash of Reichland Flesh Shade, and this really helped sell the effect, I think. The diorama was still looking quite bare, however, so I raided some old sprues for bits I could use. On a Victrix Viking sprue, I found some little daggers, hand tools and pouches, which scaled quite well as larger 10mm versions. These would be scattered around the floor to help sell the idea that a battle with Smaug had taken place, or perhaps some of them belonged to would-be robbers who hadn't had the luxury of a magic ring. For the backboard, I also created a couple of burnt and weathered banners with some masking tape, as well as some wall decorations and some torch holders. It's definitely looking a bit more interesting now. With the end in sight, it was finally time to turn my attention to the hero of the story, Bilbo. I'd already decided to go with this hobbit with the staff. It just felt wrong to have Bilbo with a sword in his hand. The scene is a conversation with Smaug, and it's about Bilbo's wit and Smaug's narcissism. Swords are of no more use here. With that settled, it was time to get painting. And I'll spare you the step by step, not least of all because it was impossible to stay in focus while painting such a small miniature. After so much experimentation and trial and error, it was a real joy to be doing something I was comfortable with, and I had a great time painting this miniature. And I'm really happy with how he turned out as well. And with that, the diorama was finally all but done. Let's take a look at how it turned out. So there we have it, my own depiction of A Conversation with Smaug. How do you think it turned out? In the end, I left Bilbo's invisibility down to the viewer's imagination. We can see him, but Smaug can't. I think that's fine. As I said at the start of the video, this is my first, and possibly last, diorama, and I must say, I have a newfound respect for the time and effort it takes to put one of these together. This video was supposed to come out a lot earlier, but all of us taking part completely underestimated the time it would take, so apologies for the lack of uploads. Let me know if there's anything you think I should have done differently, and I'm curious to know what 10mm Middle-earth diorama you would love to try. Be sure to check out and support the other channels taking part in this collaboration. All the links will be in the description below, and thanks to Macc's Armies of Arda in particular for inviting me to take part. Much appreciated, man. If you want to stick around some more, there'll be a dramatic reading of how the conversation with Smaug plays out in the book after this outro, with some cool cinematic shots of the diorama. But if you've had enough of my voice, God knows I have, then hopefully I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching.
Well, thief, I smell you, and I feel your air. I hear your breath. Come along, help yourself again. There is plenty and to spare.
No thank you, O Smaug the Tremendous. I did not come for presents. I only wished to have a look at you and see if you were truly as great as the tales say. I did not believe them.
Do you now?
Truly songs and tales fall utterly short of the reality, O Smaug the chiefest and greatest of calamities.
You have nice manners for a thief and a liar. You seem familiar with my name, but I don't seem to remember smelling you before. Who are you, and where do you come from, may I ask?
You may indeed. I come from under the hill, and under the hills and over the hills my path led, and through the air. I am he that walks unseen.
So I can well believe. But that is hardly your usual name.
I am the clue finder, the web cutter, the stinging fly. I was chosen for the lucky number.
Lovely titles. But lucky numbers don't always come off.
I am he that buries his friends alive and drowns them and draws them out alive again from the water. I came from the end of a bag, but no bag went over me.
These don't sound so creditable.
I am the friend of bears and the guest of eagles. I am ringwinger and luckwearer. I am barrel rider.
That's better. But don't let your imagination run away with you. I thought so last night. Lake men, some nasty scheme of those miserable tub-trading lake men, or I am a lizard. I haven't been down that way for an age, but I will soon alter that. Very well, old barrel rider. Maybe Barrel was your pony's name, and maybe not, though it was fat enough. You may walk unseen, but you did not walk all the way. Let me tell you, I ate 6 ponies last night, and I shall catch and eat the others before long. In return for your excellent meal, I will give you one piece of advice for your good. Don't have more to do with dwarves than you can help.
Dwarves?
Don't talk to me. I know the smell and taste of dwarf. No one better. Don't tell me that I can eat a dwarf-ridden pony and not know it. You will come to a bad end if you go with such friends, thief, barrel rider. I don't mind if you go back and tell them so from me. I suppose you got a fair price for that cup last night. Come now, did you? Nothing at all? Well, that's just like them. And I suppose they are skulking outside, and your job is to do all the dangerous work and get what you can when I'm not looking, for them. And you'll get a fair share. Don't you believe it? If you get off alive, you will be lucky.
You don't know everything, O Smaug the Mighty. Not gold alone brought us hither.
You admit the us. Why not say us 14 and be done with it, Mr. Lucky Number? I am pleased to hear that you had other business in these parts beside my gold. In that case, you may perhaps not altogether waste your time. I don't know if it occurred to you that even if you could steal the gold bit by bit, a matter of 100 years or so, you could not get it very far. Not much use on the mountainside, not much use in the forest. Bless me, had you ever thought of the catch? A 14th share, I suppose, or something like it. Those were the terms, eh? But what about delivery? What about cartage? What about armed guards and tolls?
I tell you, that gold was only an afterthought with us. We came over hill and under hill, by wave and wind, for revenge. Surely, O Smaug, the unaccessibly wealthy, you must realize that your success has made you some bitter enemies.
Revenge? Revenge? The king under the mountain is dead, and where are his kin that dare seek revenge? Gideon, Lord of Dale, is dead. I have eaten his people like wolf among sheep, and where are his sons that dare approach me? I kill where I wish, and none dare resist. I laid low the warriors of old, and their like is not in the world today. Then I was but young and tender. Now I am old and strong, thief in the shadows. My armor is like 10-fold shields, my teeth are swords, my claws spears, and the shock of my tail a thunderbolt, my wings a hurricane, and my breath death.
I have always understood that dragons were softer underneath, especially in the region of the chest, but doubtless one so fortified has thought of that.
Your information is antiquated. I am armoured above and below with iron scales and hard gems. No blade can pierce me.
I might have guessed it. Truly there can be nowhere to be found on the equal of Lord Smaug the Impenetrable. What magnificence to possess a waistcoat of fine diamonds.
Yes, it is rare and wonderful indeed. Look. What do you say to that?
Dazzlingly marvellous, perfect, flawless, staggering. Old fool, why is there a large patch in the hollow of his left breast as bare as a snail out of its shell? Well, I really must not detain your magnificence any longer, or keep you from much needed rest. Ponies take some catching, I believe, after a long start, and so do burglars. Never laugh at live dragons, Bilbo, you fool. You aren't nearly through this adventure yet.